Hey, this is Wild Bill coming to you from inside the most dangerous and notorious prison in Central America. To tell you, just to introduce myself before we get started, I'm serving a 46-year sentence for quintuple homicide, and here I am on Bizarre Bazaar coming to you. We're going to answer a couple of questions today regarding the murder contract carried out by myself against Michael Wesson Brown and his family.
Welcome back to Bizarre Bazaar, and in this episode we speak again with Wild Bill. This is my fourth video with Bill, so if you've not seen the others, I strongly recommend you go check them out. In this episode, Bill talks about the murder of the family, the actual killings, which until now he's refused to talk about. Before we start, if you want to write to inmates like I do, then use the service I use. It's called Gmail. It's fast and it's secure, and it means you don't have to use your home address. That's the main reason why I like it. I get physical letters sent to my house, but I don't give the inmates my address. I'll leave a link to their services in the description below. Just go check out the website. And if you enjoyed this video, please help me out by dropping it a like and subscribing if you're new. Finally, Bill has a Facebook group called Friends of Brother Bill. He's normally giving updates on his life inside prison. He also wrote a memoir which is available on Amazon. You can get this and check out the Facebook group via links in the description.
So before we get started with the true story of how and why I murdered Mike Brown, his wife, and his 17-year-old son, I wanted to make a few things really crystal clear to the listener. First of all, I repent of everything that I ever did that was illegal or immoral, and not just because I'm in prison, not just because I got caught. I have the opportunity today to make a great deal of money off the telling of my horrible, selfish crimes and making myself a figure in the true crime community by reveling in my evil deeds. And I've declined that offer again and again, and always will. The host of this show, my good friend Mike, can attest to my unwillingness to be that priest of evil, that my unwillingness to profit off the suffering that I cause. Lastly, and the last thing I'd like to deal with before we get started is I want the whole world to know that I'm a changed man. I'm a different man than I used to be. In November of 2011, I accepted Jesus Christ, and today, since 2020, I'm a Christian minister inside the most dangerous prison in Central America, and that's saying a lot because it's a dangerous place. I have a church inside the prison, and as the prisoner, prison chaplain, while I'm serving a 46-year sentence. So if Mike doesn't mind, we'll just get started talking about...
Go for it, Mike.
...the murder contract of Michael Wesson Brown. Now, Michael Wesson Brown was the man's name, was a name that was given to him by the Witness Protection Program on behalf of the Drug Enforcement Agency, the United States DEA. Brown ratted, that wasn't his real name. I don't remember what it was right now. I'm sitting here talking to you guys. I can't remember what his real name was. Brown had ratted on many organized crime figures in the late 1990s in Florida, in the United States, Florida, on behalf of the Drug Enforcement Agency. They were putting pressure on Brown to cooperate or face a lengthy sentence for drug trafficking. So he elected to rat on his friends. It's easy for me to vilify a victim. There's nothing that I did was good. I mean, I don't want to make that like I'm justifying what I did. It was what I did was wrong. So, but I want to tell the truth as well. Mike Brown chose to rat on all his friends and put them all in prison to save his own ass. And that's just a terrible thing to do, actually. I knew Brown professionally, he being part of an expatriate or foreign criminal network that during this time was controlled the territorial province of Panama. And I want to talk a little bit about that. It wasn't like, like you see in the movies, like they have like a mafia that everybody, gets together and there's a boss. It wasn't like that at all. It's just a loose network of crooks who were all either fugitives or involved in organized crime or involved, like for instance, I was the murderer. I was the hitman of that little circle of friends. It wasn't really like an organized, we didn't call it anything, but you knew this guy and he knew that guy, and we all just kind of got to know each other. So like there's a drug trafficker and like Brown was a human trafficker in this time. They moved people from China, I think it was, up to Jamaica and then on to the United States. But I knew Brown professionally because I captained the boats for Mike Brown for just a short period of time, about 3 months earlier, like in 2005, 2006. Then I went for a long period of time that I didn't see Mike Brown. And in a very unexpected way, which I can't really talk about, I found out that Brown was really another man and not who he claimed to be. His name wasn't Michael Watson Brown. It was something. It was Michael. His name was Mike, but it was something else. Like I say, if you look him up online, you can find out about it. And he wasn't who he claimed to be. And there was a considerable reward by some really heavy hitters in the United States state of Florida, who had friends and brothers who were still serving time in the can 25 years later because of Mike Brown's testimony against them in the late 90s. Well, this was like 15 years later, because all this took place between 2005 and 2007. Actually, I killed Mike Brown in 2007, but I knew him from 2005 from captaining. I was the captain of boats that carried human beings from Boca del Toro in Panama to Jamaica. But anyway, so these guys were really Mike Brown, obviously, for putting their brothers in prison, when their associates in prison. Mike had forgotten about them, but they hadn't forgotten about him. And the contract on Brown, I found out, was offered to anybody who would take it up for $125,000. $125,000 in that time was a lot of money for me, and I wanted to do the job. I'd never killed anybody professionally before. I had killed one man, but it wasn't murder. It was in self-defense, like a year before. I'm probably not the man who those guys would have chosen to do the job, but I was the only one who knew where Brown was and the only one on the ground in Panama. And this was my first professional hit. You know, I'd killed one guy before, but it was in self-defense. It wasn't something that, it was actually something I was considering doing, but it wasn't something that opportunity hadn't presented itself. Now, I want to talk about how it usually works. It usually works like this. A guy like me finds somebody that they got a hit contract out on, and then he gets 10%. That's what the finder's fee is. So, like, the contract on Mike Brown was $125,000. If I turn that over to the bosses in Florida and they send somebody down and take care of the job, I'd get $12,500. But $12,500 was not life-changing money to me during that time. I mean, I'd spend that in like 2 months. And so if I just did the job, and if I just did what they normally do, and I call, hey, here he is, blah blah blah, I get $12,500. It's not, that wouldn't save me from what I felt like I was up against. I was kind of broke at the time. And so anyway, so I decided to do the job and become a professional killer with this job. And so I didn't want to walk away with $12,500. I wanted to walk away with $125,000. Now, it was also, if I hadn't done the job, it's probably likely that I would have killed anybody else either, and never became a hitman. Actually, greed is a powerful motivation. If I had not killed Mike Brown, somebody else would have. That's 100% surety. No way he'd be alive today. And that doesn't alleviate me about guilt at all. But what I want to really hammer home is that I killed myself by doing the job. By doing that job, I killed myself. I crossed a barrier that was there was no turning back from it after that. I became a murderer, a professional killer, and that in and of itself is a kind of death. Being a criminal is one thing. Being somebody I was wanted for fraud in the United States. That's one thing. You're talking about a 5 or 6 year sentence, But being a murderer is really another thing. And you can recover easily from being a fraudster, from being a con man. But recovering from being a contract killer is almost impossible. It's not impossible because I'm doing it right now. But man, I'm telling you, it's really hard. And putting your life back together after receiving a 46-year sentence and having committed atrocities like I have is very difficult and a daunting task. I encourage anybody listening who might be considering a life of crime in any way to reconsider. Embezzlement, theft, sneaking $20 out of the cash register, even small things like that. Really, there's no free lunch, and when karma comes back around on you. So when you commit a crime and you get away with it, it's really the worst absolutely the worst thing that can happen to you is that you commit a crime and you get away with it, because you're absolutely 100% going to do it again. 100%. Easy money is more addictive than heroin, I can tell you. So anyway, thanks for listening to that. But anyway, 125 grand to kill Mike Brown was offered to me. So this is what happened to me. It was really a difficult thing. I had no intention of killing a woman and a child in the deal, but I knew Brown, and so I got back in, and I hadn't talked to him in about a year, maybe a little bit more. So I went out to see him, and looking at how he was living on an island. Actually, it wasn't an island. It was on the mainland, but there was no road access. You had to go there by boat. And then when I say you have to, man, we're talking heart of darkness stuff here, you know? Because, I mean, this place is out in the middle of nowhere. There's a tiny little town that's out in the middle of nowhere, and then from that tiny little town, you got to grab a boat, or have your own boat, because there's no inter-transport system or anything. You got to contract a boat driver or have a boat to go 15 miles across the ocean to get to where this place was. I mean, we're talking about it's out buried in the middle of nowhere. And so I went out there and I talked to him, and we had drinks. And then there was no way to do it without killing the wife and the kids too. There's no way to do it. So I had decided, well, I guess I'm not going to do it. You know, I'm not going to do that. So I came back and I called back to the States and talked to the boys, and I'm like, hey, and back in Florida, and said, hey, there's no way this can't be done like the way you guys want it done, because the way he doesn't leave there. He never leaves there. He's paranoid. He won't leave there. And he's got his wife and his kids there. And they said, well, we'll up the contract to $250,000. Let's kill them all. And I was like, man, that's an enormous amount of money for me. It was, you know, in that time period, and I agreed to it. It wasn't even something, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't something that I was like, I balked at. It wasn't something I thought, oh no, maybe I should. I was like, I jumped on it. $250,000 for me in that time period was a lot of money. And for me to sit here and tell you that I was some kind of nice guy and it was really hard, that's a lie. I was like really a terrible person, and I accepted the money. I agreed, and I visited Brown on the pretense of buying his home. He knew talking to him. He knew that he was in deep trouble. He knew that he was in trouble. He knew that the boys back in Florida had wind of him. He knew that, and he was trying to get back to top where his wife and her family are from. Anyway, so I went out on the pretense of maybe buying his home. He was trying to settle it. It was a huge piece of property. It's like 82 hectares, like 225 acres on the ocean. But I mean, like really remote. When I'm talking remote, I'm talking heart of darkness stuff, you know, like Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I mean, way out in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody that even speaks Spanish there. The Indians speak their own language. They don't even speak Spanish there. And so I visited him, and I was known to Brown, obviously, so he was comfortable with me. And Brown knew that the Florida boys wanted to whack him, and he was really trying to get out of there. So he was excited when I said, you know, I'd hit it big, and that I always loved that property and was interested in buying it. So I visited Brown and stayed the night. And the way that I actually carried out the hit, it took me a couple of days to feel comfortable to do it. I stayed there a couple of days, and I think that they were even wondering, like, what the hell is he doing here? What, you know, you're going to buy the place? You're not going to buy the place? Well, anyway, and it was getting kind of uncomfortable. So the third day I was there, I asked Brown to show. I want to, before I start talking about killing people, I want you to understand that there's nothing good about what I'm going to say right now, nor do I feel in any way proud of anything I'm talking about here. And there's a reason. The host of this show is a really nice guy named Mike. Asked me to come on and talk about this today, and the only pretense I gave is I want to be able to explain my actions and explain who I am and what's going on with me today. And so I'm going to tell this story. It's really terrible, but this is what I did. I asked Brown to show me a place on the back of the property where there was a well that I thought would make a perfect hydroelectric dam, and it did. I actually did that later, but it was just a pretense to kill him. And so we went up there, and as we were walking through the jungle, and when I say jungle, I'm talking about virgin, thick jungle, way far away from home, I shot him in the back of the head with a 38 Smith & Wesson revolver. I always used a 38 Smith & Wesson hammerless 5-shot revolver because it's small. I can hide it on my person anywhere, just like right in my pocket or anywhere, because it's a very small thing. It doesn't have a hammer on it, so if you're fighting with somebody and you pull it out, and nobody can stop it from going off. Nobody can stop it from firing. It's a really good weapon for anybody to carry, really. But in this line of work, it's the best. And the reason I don't carry a pistol is because in the jungle, especially in the jungles of Panama, in the jungles of Costa Rica, the pistols have a tendency to jam. They get sweaty and rust up easy and get jammed. And the ammunition sometimes fails. If you have a revolver and the ammunition fails, you just pull the trigger again. But if you have a pistol and the ammunition fails, you have to stop, chamber the round, and then move. I mean, that's long enough for you to get killed. So I shot Mike Brown in the back of the head, and he had no idea, really in the back of the neck. That was also research. I did quite a bit of research on what, I mean, I didn't have anybody train me how to be a professional killer. I had to train myself. And so I did a little bit of research online about where would be the best place to like put somebody's lights out. I mean, I'm talking about, I don't want anybody, first of all, the whole idea of torturing somebody with the thought of the fact that you're about to die, like, ha ha ha, you're about to die, I'm going to kill you. I don't have that in me even then. I mean, I didn't have that maliciousness in me even then. So when I would do a hit, I would do it kind of like a chicken shit, you know, like in a cowardly way by nobody knowing that they were going to die beforehand, which I think actually is less traumatic for the victim. Certainly was less traumatic for me as a perpetrator. And I never took much, didn't take any, joy in hurting anybody. It was just that I didn't have any morals at the time, and it was easy to kill anybody. I didn't care. I wanted my money, and that's where I was in that time of my life. I'm no longer there. Anyway, so I shot Mike Brown in the back of the head, and there he was. So now we're on a piece of property that's 225 acres big, and on the back side of it. It's also 2 or 3 days before Christmas in 2007. I think it was 2007. It's either 2006 or 2007, but I'm almost 100% sure it was 2007. Anyway, so and that's significant for one reason, and was planned that it would happen during that time period for the reason that everybody in Panama uses fireworks during Christmas time. And so, like, all day, blah, 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 all day, there's fireworks going off, and a gunshot is not going to be distinguished between them. Even out in the middle of the jungle, the Indian kids are like shooting off fireworks all day. I mean, I was ecstatic when I got there and I could hear the fireworks going off everywhere, because to like line up a family and kill them one at a time is not something that I could stomach even then. There's no way to do that for me. So I went back to the house and told the kid, I said, your dad told you to get a shovel. He was 17 years old. I told your dad, I catch a lot of shit from people justly in a just way, in a very just manner. I mean, it's terrible what I did. But I catch a lot of flack from people because I killed a 17-year-old kid. I didn't know that he was underage. I knew he was young, but I didn't know that he was underage, and it wouldn't have mattered if I did know that he was. But he was about 3 months shy of being 18 years old. And there's no excuse. I don't have any excuse. I can't tell you that I would have not have done it if I had known he was 17. I'm sure I probably would have. And it's not something I even considered, to be honest with you. And so I came back to the house and I told him that his dad wanted him to bring a shovel and come back to the back of the property. And he was kind of a kid that stayed on the computer all the time and wasn't one that liked to be outside at all. And went to the shed and got a shovel and went back. And when it was in with maybe 50 yards of where his father lay dead, I shot him in the back of the head as well, in the same place in the back, between where the neck and the skull come together. And so he fell dead. And then I returned, and the woman, she was from Thailand, was working in the garden. And so I shot her in the back of the head when she just walked up behind her and shot her as well. And this is really difficult. It's actually really difficult to even talk about if you want the truth, because I spend a lot of time. I'm famous because I'm a murderer. I'm famous because I told that. I said I went through that, but I kind of skimmed over it. I'll give you the truth, because it's just really difficult to talk about. I can't even believe that I'm the person that did those things. Even though I have the memories, I kind of have them recessed, blocked there. But anyway, so I had killed the father and the son, and I came back to the house, and the lady was in the garden just gardening. She's doing her thing, and I walked up behind her and shot her in the back of the head as well. She's in the garden, dressed in her gardening clothes. The two men are up 2 miles away on the backside of the property. There was a small ATV vehicle there on the property, I put the lady in the ATV the vehicle, drove it as far back to the back of the property as I could go, which isn't very far, honestly. It lacks about a mile to get to where the men were. From there, I put there was like a burlap bag, a sack that had, I don't know, gardening utensils and stuff in it. I took that sack out and I put the lady's body in the burlap bag. She didn't weigh very much. She was very small. Well, maybe she weighed 120 pounds. I'm a huge man, not huge, but I'm a very large man. I'm 6'1" and I weigh about 200. When at this time I was fat, I weighed about 280 pounds. I weigh today, I'm 6'1", I weigh about 225 pounds. But I threw her the bag over my shoulder and carried her to where the two bodies of the men were. From there, I excavated two shallow graves and put the body of the son and the mother in one grave and the man in the other one. These are very, very difficult and terrible things to talk about. Every time I do one of these interviews, I made a promise to myself that I actually wouldn't do any more of these type of interviews talking about things from the past. But the only reason that I even agreed to do this interview was for the opportunity to talk about the way that Christ has changed my life. That's hard for a lot of people to believe. It's hard for anybody to believe that doesn't know Jesus Christ. That's the thing. But I thought that maybe by doing the interview, God could get some glory off of the terrible, horrible man that I used to be compared with the very domesticated man that I am today, and the service-oriented man. Even during that time period of my life, man, that was a terrible thing. I had a really hard time with that act. I wanted the money, but my conscience really messed with me hard. Really gave me a lot of shit, you know. Even then, and I remember that night. I went back to their house. It wasn't even my house, right? So I went back to their house, and there I had to get really drunk to catch any sleep at all. And that was the beginning of that. I mean, I remember that was I became a drunk actually. The conscience at night, not just my conscience about the evil things I was doing, but also like the fear of getting caught was really, really high. And the only way to deal with that fear was being shit-faced drunk every night to beat the anxiety down. That created an alcoholic. I mean, it was like an alcoholic, you know, like you think of an alcoholic, the guy wakes up in the morning drinking. I didn't do that. But when the sun went down at night, man, you know, I started drinking vodka, and I drank vodka every night for the purpose, not even the purpose of like enjoying myself or anything. It was like an antidepressant, and like I used it like Valium, you know. I mean, I used it to numb that conscience that was screaming at me. I was a hitman. And like this happened 17 years ago or something like that. 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And this 15 years removed from these events, I'm just not even that person anymore, and I spend all my time doing something else now. I don't think of myself as a killer at all. And to talk about them, I want you to understand it's really difficult for me to even accept the fact that I did these things. And so anyway, the question is, how did no one else hear gunshots? Well, I talked about that. It was Christmas week in 2007, and in Latin America, fireworks, even the local Indian children there, the native Indian children there play with fireworks, and so nobody heard anything. When everything was done, I buried the bodies in the corner of that property. I mean, they said in the news media that they had found bodies in my home. That's not true at all. I buried those people like 2 miles away from where that house was, and they were murdered about 2 miles away from. The lady was murdered in the backyard, but the two men were murdered in about 2 miles away from the house. Anyway, the property was 82 hectares, or about 225 acres. Huge place, almost all virgin jungle, and only 20 acres or so was an actual farm. When inspecting the home after the murders, I was there. Like, I remember that night, I was distraught. Really, I mean, like really shaken. You know what I mean, from what I had done, and I remember getting really, really drunk and calling back to the States and telling them it was done. And they said, okay, well, and so I sent some pictures as proof, and they accepted them and were ecstatic about it, and said they'd get with me in a couple of days to pay. When I was inspecting the home, I found a safe, a very large safe, in the floor. And I knew a lot about safe cracking because I learned how to crack safes in the United States. I had an old guy show me how to do that. It was a very lucrative thing. When you crack safes in the States, you get 20% of what's in the safe. So if you crack a safe and got $100,000, you get 20 grand. I mean, and it's not that much work, really. So I cracked the safe, and when the safe was opened, there was over $600,000 US dollars in cash in the safe. And so I had so much cash, I thought to myself that night, $250,000, I don't even need that anymore, you know? And I loved the place. The place was like something out of the island of Dr. Moreau or something. You know, I mean, it was like incredible out in the middle of nowhere. It was all set up. And so what I did is I asked the boys in Florida to help me to change the papers over. And they had the U.S. mob put me in contact with their lawyer on the ground in Panama. And I gave up my payment and elected to have payment made to me by having the property switched over into my name. Now, that benefited everybody because the mob probably only bribed the lawyer 30 or 50 grand at the most. And then I ended up getting an island fortress, something straight out of the island of Moreau, as I said. And so a life of contract killing began for me. I went from being nobody, just a small-time criminal, to being like really a big shot in one day. And I'd like to say a few things, if Michael let me, short things about my life between 2006 and 2010 as a contract killer. I became one of the highest level figures in organized crime in Panama. I became the Punisher, the foreign Punisher. When I say foreign, I mean expatriates, people in the United States, Germany, England. When you need somebody erased in Panama, I was your man. And I rubbed shoulders with Panama's elite during this time period. I had an airplane, 3 homes, a huge farm, 2 yachts, 6 boats, 4 brand new automobiles, you know, that year's model. All the women and cocaine that you could handle and still be able to be alive. And that sounds like every man's dream. It really does. It sounds like something, or at least like a sort of a fantasy that every man would have. And it certainly was my fantasy. But then when it came true, I want you to know I was utterly miserable as a man. I mean, like a whole bunch of naked women, a mountain of cocaine, and a fistful of $100 bills are fun for a little while. I mean, you can't say they're not. I mean, that's a fun thing, right? But after just a little while, living a life based purely on your own pleasure and sexual escapades gets really, really old and really lonely. I mean, like, I'm serious. Like, it's extremely. You think that, I was a fugitive, and my life was a house of cards, and I knew it. You know, nobody loved me at all, and all those women were just because I had cash and cocaine and a certain fame as a bad guy. Women love that, and they still do. I mean, women still look for me because of that, you know, because I'm Wild Bill or whatever. And it was fun. There was moments. I mean, there was really some high moments. It's impossible for me to say to you that being in a room with 3 naked women and a mountain of cocaine and $400,000 in cash is a bad thing. You feel great about it, but then in the morning when the girls are gone and you're hungover and you know that it's just all a lie, because in any moment the cops come down on you or somebody else kills you. That was what I thought that would happen to me. I didn't actually think, not even for a moment, that I'd ever be put in prison. I thought that I would be murdered by somebody else for what I had, because that's what I did, right? Mm-hmm. And like I had such an anxiety. You know, who was a cop in disguise? Who was an enemy agent sent to kill me? When would the police catch up to me? The anxiety was absolutely unbearable. I got hammered with a 46-year sentence on the 27th of July in 2010 for 5 homicides.
If you have any questions for Wild Bill, please leave them in the comments below, and we will do a Q&A video with him soon. That's all I've got time for in this episode. Until next time, stay sane.